My name is Grace Williams. I have been married to my husband Thomas for 6 years. And I can tell you exactly what a room full of people sounds like when it goes completely silent. It sounds like nothing. Absolute nothing. 31 people around a Thanksgiving table. Children, cousins, elderly aunts, and not one single sound after my mother-in-law's hand connected with my face. Not one person moved. Not one person spoke. The only sound in that entire room was the quiet that follows something nobody expected and nobody knew how to answer. I sat very still. My cheek was burning. My eyes were wet, but I refused to let the tears fall. And I made a decision in that silence that changed everything that came after it. My mother-in-law's name is Ruth. She is 67 years old. She is the kind of woman who has always believed that being older meant being right. That experience meant authority. That family loyalty meant agreement. For 6 years, I had navigated her carefully. Not because I was afraid of her, because I loved Thomas, and Thomas loved his mother. And I had learned early in our marriage that the fastest way to lose a good husband is to make him feel like he must choose between the women he loves. So I chose patience instead. I chose kindness instead. I chose to absorb the small insults and the pointed comments and the holiday table comparisons because I believed that one day Ruth would see me clearly. I was wrong about the timeline, but I was right about one thing. She did eventually see me clearly, just not in the way either of us expected. The Thanksgiving dinner had started normally. Thomas and I had driven 3 hours to Ruth's house. We had brought wine and 2 homemade pies and the good tablecloth Ruth liked. I had spent the previous evening preparing things I knew Ruth would appreciate. Because that was what I always did. I prepared. I contributed. I showed up ready to be helpful and warm and easy. 31 members of Thomas's family filled the house. The kitchen smelled like turkey and cinnamon. Children ran through the hallway. Football played on the television in the living room. Everything felt like Thanksgiving is supposed to feel. Until dessert. Ruth stood up to make a toast. She did this every year. It was her tradition, and everyone expected it, and everyone smiled and raised their glasses and waited. She thanked everyone for coming. She talked about family. She talked about gratitude. Then she looked directly at me. And she said something I was not prepared for. She said that this year she was especially grateful for the family members who truly understood what family meant. She said that not everyone at the table had demonstrated that understanding. She looked at me the entire time she said it. The room shifted uncomfortably. Thomas put down his fork. I kept my expression steady. Ruth continued. She said she had learned recently that I had been speaking about her privately to her sister. She said I had been sharing information about family matters that were not mine to share. I had done no such thing. I had never spoken about Ruth to her sister. Not once. Not ever. I opened my mouth to say so calmly, and before a single word came out of my mouth, Ruth stepped away from her chair, walked around the table toward me, and slapped me across the face. The silence that followed lasted approximately 4 seconds. I know because I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then Thomas stood up. He did not shout. He did not overreact. He simply stood up from his chair, looked at his mother, and said 3 words in the quietest voice I had ever heard him use. We are leaving. Ruth immediately began explaining. She said I had provoked her. She said I had been disrespecting her for years. She said the things I had supposedly told her sister were a betrayal of the family. Thomas did not argue with a single word she said. He simply picked up my coat from the back of my chair. He held it open for me. He waited. I stood up. I picked up my purse. I looked around the table at 30 people who were all looking at everything except me. And I walked out of Ruth's house without saying a word. In the car, Thomas reached for my hand before he started the engine. He held it for a long moment without speaking. Then he said, I am so sorry. I looked at him. You have nothing to apologize for. She hit you, Grace. In front of my entire family. I know. Are you okay? I thought about that question carefully. I will be. He started the car. We drove for almost an hour without speaking. Not an uncomfortable silence. The kind of silence that happens between 2 people who understand each other well enough not to fill every moment with words. When we got home, I did something Ruth did not expect. I did not call anyone. I did not send messages. I did not post anything. I simply went to my desk and wrote one email. To Ruth's sister, Margaret. Margaret was the person Ruth had claimed I had been speaking to about family matters. I wrote her 3 sentences. I told her what Ruth had said at the dinner table. I told her what had happened afterward. And I asked her one question. Had we ever spoken about Ruth privately? Margaret replied within 20 minutes. Her answer was one word. Never. I forwarded that email to Thomas. Then I went to bed. The next morning, Thomas was already awake when I came downstairs. He had his phone in his hand. He had seen Margaret's reply. He had also, I would learn later, already spoken to 3 other family members who had been at the table the previous evening. Each of them had reached out overnight. Not to take sides, to make sure I was all right. Thomas looked at me across the kitchen. She made up the story about Margaret. Yes. She had no reason to hit you. She never had a reason. He was quiet for a moment. I've been making excuses for her behavior for 6 years. I poured myself coffee. I know. Not anymore. I looked at him. What does that mean? He placed his phone on the counter. It means I'm calling her this morning. And I'm telling her that until she apologizes to you directly and sincerely, we will not be attending family events. No Christmas. No Easter. No birthdays. Nothing. I sat down across from him. Thomas, she is your mother. Yes. And you are my wife. And what she did was wrong. And I should have said that more clearly a long time ago. Thomas called Ruth that morning. I was not in the room, but I heard enough to understand. Ruth's first response was that I had deserved it. Thomas's response to that was silence. Then Ruth said she had been provoked beyond her limits. Thomas asked her what I had specifically done to provoke her. She could not answer. Because there was no answer. Because I had done nothing. Thomas told her clearly and quietly that until she apologized, he would not be bringing me to any family gathering. Ruth said he was choosing a stranger over his own mother. Thomas said, Grace is not a stranger. She is my wife. And I am choosing my marriage. Then he ended the call. Ruth did not apologize immediately. She waited 11 days. Then she arrived at our front door on a Sunday afternoon. No warning. No phone call. She looked smaller than usual. Not physically smaller, just reduced somehow. Like a person who has spent 11 days alone with the truth of what they did. Thomas answered the door. She asked if she could speak to me. He looked at me. I nodded. She came inside. She sat down. She did not look around the room the way she usually did when she visited. She looked at her hands. Then she looked at me. And she said something I had waited 6 years to hear from this woman. Not about the slap, about everything before it. She said, I have been unfair to you since the day Thomas brought you home. I told myself I was protecting my son. The truth is I was afraid of losing him. And I took that fear out on the one person who had never done anything to deserve it. She wiped her eyes. I am sorry, Grace. For all of it. Not just for what happened at Thanksgiving. For all of it. I accepted her apology. Not because the pain disappeared, but because I had never wanted Ruth as an enemy. I had only ever wanted to be seen clearly. That Sunday afternoon, for the first time in 6 years, she finally looked at me without calculation, without comparison, without the careful management of someone deciding how much space I was allowed to occupy. She looked at me like a person. And that was all I had ever asked for. We did go to Christmas that year. The table felt different.